Right, hello everybody, thank you for coming. I'm Simon. I will tell you when the pictures from Rwanda are going to come on the screen. I'm afraid they are very, very horrible, but if you want to just go away, it's only about 3 minutes. Rather than talk about, I've been to this place and I did a project here and I did this, I've been to the moon and I've been to Pluto and I've been to blah, blah, blah. I'm much keener on talking about why I make the pictures, even the pictures that are on the wall here, about the ideas which are kind of beneath them, as it were. So I want to try and undelve that. First of all, we have a question and answer session, so wake up. These are two pictures of the same man, 2 years apart. He was a Native American, Navajo Indian, 1887, and he was chosen to be given an American education. A white education, was sent to a special university which was meant to civilize the Indians. What do you think? An improvement? Something else? Any thoughts? Say it very quietly. I would say something very sad has happened here. There's something really tragic. There's something like a fire has gone out. Something really beautiful about the guy on the left, and something very ordinary about the man on the right. And let's not get it wrong. This guy was now going to be offered a fantastic opportunity to succeed in life, to leave the reservation, to have an education, to go into white America and be successful. But there does seem to be something really brutal about what it took. So, I would have to say, and by the way, the motto of the college that he went to was, "Kill the Indian, save the man." So all the projects that I'm going to show you are a little bit about time moving through a space. That interests me a great deal. How do things move through time, and how do we go from picture A to picture B, but then we have to imagine what happened during picture AB, somewhere in the between of these two things. There was a time when I did a book about a photographer called John Burke, who was the first photographer to go to Afghanistan in 1878. He went with the British Army that were invading Afghanistan in 1878. And for a long time after that, people would send me pictures. "Oh, hello, I have a picture from my great-grandfather. Do you think it's a John Burke picture? Do you think this is, have you seen his picture before?" And so people would just send me things, big boxes of JPEGs. So what do you think? Yes, no, maybe, don't know, this one. And for a long time I had this big box of pictures from somebody, and I kept coming back again and again. So this picture, and this is very typically John Burke, and also it's signed by John Burke, so it's definitely a John Burke. But also this picture was in the box here. Now John Burke is always his photography is always very smart, very tidy, very organized, very formal, very beautiful. And this picture, it's kind of messy. It's a little bit disorganized. There's no sort of structure to it. And I struggled for a long time. The color looks like Burke. The faces look like Burke. Certainly looks like Afghanistan. And he was probably the only photographer in Afghanistan, but there were some others maybe. I spent ages looking at them. Can anybody tell me anything? Come on, sophisticated photographic observers. Can you tell me anything that you think about these two pictures? No? No? Oh, I thought you were all sophisticated.
The process is kind of identical.
The process is identical?
The poses.
The poses are identical. Yes, but most photography in British India is a little bit like this. It's very interesting, the poses, because I think the pose is really exciting because you have a guy like this, one like this, there's a guy like that, this guy's like this guy's like that, this guy, and it makes the picture go pop, 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 which I think is really great, because otherwise it would be like this. So I think the pose is very interesting. Anything else?
Obviously they're in different uniforms on one picture, which maybe on lower one you can see the diversity of how they're dressed and so on, and the top one maybe less, I don't know.
Well, there's certainly, I'll give you a clue, there's certainly something that's broken down, some kind of discipline is broken down. There's the clue, it's the same people. It took me months to work it out. It's actually the same people. This is before they left India, British India, so they're dressed for the northern India, very hot, and this is in Afghanistan in the winter. And obviously discipline has collapsed. They're making their own clothes from rugs, from skins. Rugs, skins. They're using civilian clothes and military clothes. But I think what else is interesting between these two pictures is discipline seems to have broken down. There's no formality. The skin of the faces seems tougher, harder. These guys have been in Afghanistan for a year. I think it has screwed them up. I'll tell you another thing about the picture. This picture is this wide, and this picture is this wide. And when soldiers come under attack, they bunch up. John Burke has actually had to remove this much of the picture because they physically occupy less space. They're like this. Look at this corner. Could you think of a better metaphor? Hunkered into a kind of corner, you know, under fire. Whereas this top picture seems to take place in some kind of imperial theatre, you know, with drapes and carpets on the floor. So what interests me about these two pictures is the transition between that interests me enormously. And trying to do that as a photographer, for me, it's the most exciting thing. It pisses me off no end. On my camera, on the top, it says a 30th, a half a second, a quarter second, 1 second, and I want to keep turning that. I want it to say a week, a month, 6 years, a year, 120 years. Right, back to Afghanistan. That's what I want to do to my camera. And it annoys the hell out of me that I can't do it. And everything I'm doing these days is trying to break that dial on the top of my camera, as it were, trying to reach back through time, because then photography gets really exciting for me. So when I went to Afghanistan and I followed in John Burke's footsteps, I really wanted to kind of replicate this idea of his. I copied his idea of this pose of people looking in different directions. I carried around these carpets and we would lay them on the floor to make a kind of theatre, a sort of circus for the picture to exist in. It's a really lovely idea. It makes a little kind of place for the photograph to take place. And then I also kind of copied some of the people that he was dealing with. This is a picture of this is the King of Afghanistan, Prime Minister. This is the British Ambassador and his assistant in 1878. And this is the British Ambassador, and now he has Nepalese mercenary security guards because the British can't even afford to pay their own soldiers. So they get Nepalese people to do it. So I copied all of his ideas, the pose, and even the colour of the imagery. I did a special conversion to black and white that copies the way this film copies the black and white, which is really only using the red channel only, which is what that old film used to do. So that I liked very much the idea of taking John Burke's vocabulary, his vernacular, his structure, and then reapplying it to Afghanistan and then placing the pictures side by side. Because then for me, what you're looking back is 120 years of difference between these two things. But also, this is a British invasion of Afghanistan, and this is also another British invasion of Afghanistan, because we never learn to stop invading Afghanistan. It's something we just keep doing. I don't know why. It's stupid and we always lose. I want to talk to you about... So, who's got a favourite archaeologist? Me. No one else? Oh, come on. Love archaeology. My favourite archaeologist is Heinrich Schliemann. I love him because he was a complete bastard, and a total crook, and a gold digger. And he destroyed more things than he found. But he was an amazingly interesting man. Man spoke 32 languages. 32 languages. He was incredibly brilliant and was a millionaire before he was the age of 21. But he was a complete piece of shit. Anyway, he discovered the Mask of Agamemnon in Mycenae, a guy who managed to get himself on the stamp of 3 different countries. Pretty cool. But he's most famous for the work that he did at Troy, and the excavations at Troy, Ilium, as it was called by the Greeks, which is... It's in Turkey now. And when he dug down at Ilium, well, I have to say that this has been an obsession since I was a kid, really. My parents had this book and they gave it to us when I was a kid. It's like a children's illustrated Iliad and the Odyssey all in one book. I think I fell in love with the stories. To be honest, looking at it nowadays, I think I fell in love with the graphic design because that is terrific graphic design. I don't know if there's any graphic artists here, but look and learn. This is the name. It's a married couple, A&M Provenson. Oh, so so nice. The work is really, really great. And I devoured all of these stories. I knew all about Achilles and Hector and Ajax and all the great heroes of the Trojan War, and Helen and King Priam and the face that launched 1,000 ships and all the rest of it. So yes, the graphics were really fantastic, and I really loved these stories. But when Schliemann discovered the city, the mound of Troy, what he found was an entire hill, and the city had existed so long it had been built up and then burned and destroyed, and then on the rubble, built again and burned and destroyed, and burned and destroyed and burned and destroyed, until you end up with an entire small mountain, all of which is the layers of this city. I'm very interested in like going down through layers, looking at layers of history. And this thing actually was layers of history. And Schliemann dug into the city, and which is the city of Troy? I can see 9. I think there were 9 Trojan cities on top of each other. It might be 11 actually. No, 9, yeah. There were 9 cities on top of each other. And as he went through these archaeological layers, he couldn't work out which was the great city of Odysseus and Ajax and Brad Pitt and Achilles and all the rest of them. And he actually he got the wrong one. He dug to the wrong layer because he was looking for something really grand. And the actual layer of Homer is Troy 6. It's the one he wanted, but he made a mistake. So that layeredness of history really kind of interests me, because those things lying on top of each other, for me photographically, is really exciting. The book I did in Afghanistan was called Chronotopia. Chronos, time, topos, place. And I'm interested in any places that show their kind of historyness, their layers of history lying on top of each other, like slabs of rock in a rock fall, where you can see these histories sat above and below, and all of them lined up on top of each other. When the first time I went to Afghanistan, the Afghan said to me, "Why are you always going on about your stupid British Empire? Right? We've had them all, right? Genghis Khan, proper emperor, right? Everybody was killed. Right? Alexander the Great, proper emperor. Right? So, don't tell us about your British Empire. You'll come, and then you'll go." In Afghanistan, they have a proverb that says, "If you sit by the river long enough, one day you will see you will see the body of your enemy floating past." Right? Patience. Right? So, oh, the hell, that's out of my private collection. What the hell's that doing there? Quick, move on. So, I wanted to try and, many different ways I've been trying to do that. I'd say that's what that work is about, particularly trying to paint back into the history of this glacier by using fire. But I'm not going to talk about that so much. But I want to talk about this work I did in Afghanistan called Time Taken, because when I was there in 2014, 15, 16, everybody, all the photographers I knew, they wanted to get on helicopters, they wanted to go on a special forces raid, they wanted to fly into the war zone, go on patrol. Not interested. I was interested in what was in Afghanistan before the war, what was actually in Afghanistan all the way through the war, and what would be there afterwards. Not this high energy, high activity, high frequency thing, but this other thing underneath, which is this real Afghanistan. In French, they use this phrase, la France profonde, right? I was interested in this kind of Afghanistan profonde. What is the other Afghanistan beneath? Rural, poor, dirt poor. And I remember going into villages, and you could walk into a village and you could go, okay, if you took away that plastic bucket, that TV aerial, and that car wheel, there is nothing that I can see that I couldn't have seen 500 years ago in this place. Nothing, apart from 4 or 5 things. So I wanted to kind of peer into history. But I used to argue with my Afghan friends. I used to wind them up, you want to wind up an Afghan and say, there's no Afghan culture. You never made any decent culture. Why is there no Afghan sculpture? Why do you never write a grand opera? Why is there no Afghan haiku? There is some Afghan poetry, but and they would make furious and they would shout at me. And in the end, we kind of came to the agreement that the main product of Afghan culture is the land itself. When you were a farmer with no tools other than hand tools, no machine tools at all, no machine tools at all in the mountains, then the land itself is something which is made by the labour of your hands. You have to brush it and comb it and smooth it and replace it. The fields are all organised brilliantly, and the average Afghan farmer is a hydrological engineer. You have to be, to bring water from 5 miles away along the side of the mountain in a stream, and then it comes down, it comes onto my field, this field, and then that field, and then that field, and then Mohammed gets it after me, and then it goes back to the river. And all of those things are organised. If these fields come out of thing, the whole system falls out of place. So the landscape itself is Afghan culture, because it is worked over and prepared and combed by Afghan farmers with hundreds of hours of back-breaking work. There's no other way of doing it. Back-breaking work, much of it done by women and children. So I wanted to look at the landscape itself. But what amazed me when I started to look at the landscape is that I'm used to the idea of, in London, if you dig down 2 meters in the middle of London, you will hit Roman London. Right? It's down there beneath us. One of the great things about London is London's always been where London is. It's just all on top of itself. It's not quite, I think it's a little bit different here. Your city seems to have moved from here to up the hill and then back down the hill again. But in London, it's all below. And you go down and you find it, and you can see that the city has grown. But what amazed me about looking at the Afghan landscape over a year is that there are tiny movements that the camera can see. When a field has got no grass in it, it's down there. But when a field is full of grass, it's here now. And then you bring in the sheep, it goes back down to there. And when a tree is hanging with no leaves on it, it's like this. And then when it's full of water and heavy with leaves, it's down. And in the winter, it comes back up again. And these tiny movements, I couldn't see them with my eyes, but the camera could see them. The camera was like this unblinking kind of machine that took in everything. And I figured out if I could put the camera in exactly the same place every 6 weeks for a year, then I would see entire seasons come and go. I would see the snow march up the mountains and then come back down the mountains again. And then if I did this technique, which I call a stratograph, so it's not a time lapse, because it's not pictures made into a film. For me, time lapse goes like this. Right? That's a time lapse. These are single pictures, and then they bleed into another picture 6 weeks later. And then you look at it, and then you see the next one. And that allows you to look and go, oh my God, the farmer removed a tree. Or, oh, he's fixed that fence. And you see these tiny pieces of work in the landscape, I believe. So I call them stratographs. They're not time-lapse because it's the camera placed in exactly the same place, 6 weeks, 8 weeks apart. And slowly you see the trees come to life, you see the snow go up the mountain, you see the farmers change the landscape, adjust, bring in manure, lower fields, grow a crop, remove a crop, and a year goes by. So it's got a little piece of music, little film, it's only about 4 minutes long, okay? let me talk about something else more recent. I'm quite obsessed with the First World War. It's very close to England. It's really close to England. In fact, on the first day of the Battle of the Somme, when they blew the really big explosions, you could hear them in central London. That's how close the battlefields of the First World War were. So it's been a place which I've photographed quite intensely. I actually tried to make a documentary film there. I spent about a year photographing things. And it's somewhere that has this amazing resonance with British history, because when you're standing on the First World War battlefields, you're only 40 kilometers away from the landings during the Second World War. You're only 30 kilometers away from the battlefields of Agincourt and Crécy from the 100 Years' War. It's a place that Britain has fought over for a very long time. So I wanted to try and make a lot of work in this place. I tried to make a TV film there as well. And then, at the very beginning of my career, I was very conscious that this is a British war cemetery in Flanders. They're beautiful. There's a reason why they're beautiful. It protects you from thinking about the real horror of war. That's why the British cemeteries are so beautiful. And I wanted to make a piece of work. I was very conscious of the fact that after the First World War, the day the war ended, it did not look like this. If anything, what it looked like was one of the things I did at the very beginning of my career, one of the first really horrible things that I ever photographed, which was the genocide in Rwanda. So if anybody wants to not see the pictures in Rwanda, just go away for 5 minutes and we'll be done. But the pictures in Rwanda were very horrible. I was just a bit of a kid. I jumped on a plane, I had a bit of money from an assignment, I piled in. I got off the plane, I dropped my bag, and within about 2 hours, I was in a mass grave and I had no preparation for it whatsoever. And at the time it kind of bounced off me. About 7 months later, it really hit me very hard and affected me very, very deeply. And I think everything else in my career has been a little bit sort of afraid of that, I think, really, because it was so brutally upsetting. In one place, there was 2,000 dead bodies in a church. Dead bodies so deep that you could see them, you know, like if the wind blows and it blows leaves into a corner and it makes like a ramp. That, but with humans. So, I was conscious that that was what this landscape looked like. And for me to turn up 100 years later and make beautiful pictures seems a deceit, really, seems somehow trickery. I'm falling for this trickery that you can hide the brutality of war behind a beautiful cemetery. And don't start on me that this somehow recognizes their nobility, the nobility of sacrifice, right? No chance. There's nothing noble about being gassed with chlorine. There's nothing noble about drowning in mud. And there's nothing noble about being taught to walk towards a machine gun, right? It was mindless slaughter. You couldn't have achieved the same effect if you'd made a kind of meat grinder. So there's no nobility being hidden in these cemeteries. The cemeteries are a scam. And the landscape looked more like Rwanda, what Rwanda looked like, with chaos and dead bodies all over the place and broken buildings. And to organize my ideas, I use Keynote. And I bring in lots of pictures and I can put them in a light box in Keynote. I can move those up there and I can make a note to myself and I can change the order and I can put a bit of text there. And it's my kind of organizing thing that I do for getting my ideas together when I'm working on a project. And I accidentally made a little kind of import styles kind of mess up or something. And I brought in a picture from Rwanda and a picture from 100 years after the end of the First World War. And accidentally, there was a really long drag change between the two. Maybe 10 seconds or something for one picture to fade into another picture. And this seemed to me, it was a complete accident, I'm an idiot, but it was really exciting. Because there's the picture I made, and there's the picture I made, and in between is a picture I did not make. There's a picture the machine made. And it's not even that it's like a half-half picture, because I hope you'll see when you watch this. It's only about 3 minutes long or so. But it's that some of the pictures, they fade in the weirdest way. Some elements disappear almost immediately, but other elements stay, almost like they don't want to go. There's one picture where there's a cross on an altar, and then it becomes a landscape in France, and the cross is in the sky, in the sky, in the sky. It doesn't want to leave. It's not just like, different parts of the picture seem to dissolve at different rates. It's utterly magical. It's nothing to do with me. The machine does it. I think it's fucking brilliant. And it has that thing about trying to reach through time, which is what I'm always trying to do. So I'm sorry, the pictures are very upsetting. You can see how much you're getting upset about it now. But I don't normally show this work, right? I'd never publish this work because I was born in Nigeria, in Africa, at the end of the British Empire, and nothing pisses me off more than white photographers going to Africa, photographing black brutality and tribalism, and sticking it on the wall and winning a prize with it, right? If anyone else did it, I'd be all over you, complaining about it. And so I don't believe that this is a project that should be seen in the world. But there's no relationship between Rwanda and First World War. One didn't cause the other, or the same political forces. There's no relationship. The only relationship is, at the beginning of my career, I went to that one, shot it in black and white, and then sort of towards the end of my career, I'm an old man now, I shot these other pictures. It has no connection other than my autobiography. But I like very much the way the machine has made these new pictures, and so I'd show it in a forum like this. I hope I can explain what it's about, and that it's not gratuitous, and it's not using black bodies as another, cheap kind of colonial metaphor. But I think there is a purpose in showing it. So I wouldn't put it on the internet or publish it, but I think most of you are probably photographers or into photography, so I think it's worth seeing. I'd be interested to see what you think of it. But it's never really gone out very far. Okay? Sorry about the horribleness. The sound in the background, hopefully there'll just be one sound in the background, but it's just bird song. All the diaries and all the letters of the British soldiers, the British, beauty, what are we like? It would say things like, today I heard the first nightingale of the year, and I think there may be snowdrops growing on my trench. And the weather was beautiful, and last night I think I saw a comet in the sky, and it was marvellous. And my best friend was killed. Because the British were fucked, right? That's what we do. Hide, 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 hide. Have some beauty, don't think about it, don't think about it. It's a really English response. We've been doing it for 500 years, I can't help it. Okay? Hope there's just one sound. So these are the pictures. This is the second picture, and this is the kind of picture that the machine makes. But it's also interesting how different parts of the pictures fade away. Tell me what you think, because it's kind of experimental. Okay. I'll talk to you about something else, just briefly. About the pictures that are at the very back wall of the gallery, the shroud pictures. And again, more to just explain to you something about the inspirations and the ideas that I have, about why I made them the way I did. So the word is not quite the same. We had a conversation about this yesterday. In English, the word shroud means the cloth that you wrap a dead body, but also it's a verb. Shroud is a little bit like the word veil, perhaps. Shroud is to hide, to conceal, to block something away. In English, we have those two meanings. So, I've been to glaciers before, and I spent 16 years photographing, not conflict, but photographing in conflict zones, in particular in Afghanistan, is my specialism, I suppose. But I have done some projects on glaciers, and I've been on glaciers before, but I've never really photographed glaciers as such. And it wasn't until Project Pressure came to me and said, how about you take all the stuff that you know about conflict and start thinking about the conflict which is really climate conflict. Start thinking about how to use these skills to photograph climate change. Never thought about it at all. And it was Klaus Thumann that came up with the idea, really. So I thought about applying myself to the idea of photographing glaciers. Klaus is very interested in glaciers as a kind of a warning light, something very beautiful. Maybe it's something like a touchstone, something that we can really activate people about because they are so beautiful. It's really hard to get people interested in a 1 millimeter rise in sea levels. It doesn't photograph very well. But maybe you could get this. I'm not an expert in glaciers, but I think I know a lot about visualizing. How do we visualize the problem of a disappearance of a glacier? How do we visualize the problem of how much it will cost us to fix the problem of disappearing glaciers in the climate emergency? So I've been to glaciers before, but it's never been a specialism of me. Right, Anyone got any favourite pictures? I've got favourite paintings, a genre, a sub-genre of painting, which is landscape painting, Dutch landscape painting of the Golden Age, Dutch landscape painting of the 1640s, Dutch landscape painting of beached Wales of the 1640s in the Dutch Golden Age. One of my favourite. I'm sure you all know the stuff very well. This was a big thing for about 60 years in the Netherlands. Beached Wales. It's bizarre. But you have to think what these pictures represent. They were very, very popular for a very short period, a very turbulent history of the Netherlands history, and there's a reason for that. But these pictures were very popular. You can see that when there's a storm one night, and then everyone wakes up in the morning, and there's this monster on the beach. Everyone's come out to see these things, and they were like a sensation. What on earth would it mean? But it wasn't just a kind of curiosity, it was actually fear as well. Because you can see that when these monsters came from the deep, it must mean something is wrong with the state of the Netherlands. It must mean something wrong with our religion, with our beliefs, because why would God do this? I love this picture because so much going on in this. But there's also fear in this picture, fear that somehow what they're doing is wrong. All of these ideas is God must be unhappy with us. If he's throwing monsters on the beach, we must have sinned somehow, and we would be punished for our sins. Cleanse yourself before the big punishment comes. And so these beach whale pictures were seen as a kind of symbol of a future punishment which was ahead of us because we had sinned in some way. It seems like a great metaphor for the glaciers. The first time I ever went to a glacier, I remember walking up to Mount Kilimanjaro, and you put your hand against it. It felt like you had your hand against the side of a huge sleeping animal. You know, like, you know when they shoot an elephant so they can, the vets, you know, and it felt like you were holding the side of a kind of endangered species. And it felt like it was disappearing, just even from the heat of my hand was damaging it, you know, a little bit. It felt like it was disappearing away from me, and I was responsible for. So it seemed like these are a kind of great metaphor. I wanted to kind of carry that into the work. I was on a cycling holiday in southern Switzerland, and I came across the glacier, the Rhône Glacier. It's the glacier which is the source of the river Rhône, which goes to Arles and Marseille and into the Mediterranean. And believe me, the river comes straight out of the glacier into a lake, and then that's it, that's the river. It's really big as soon as it comes out. It's a big, big glacier. I came across it because I was following a bicycle race. It's really easy to come across it because it sits on one of the main roads across the south of Switzerland. There are other glaciers which you've got to, you know, this one, you could just go in a coach and horses and you'd almost be at the foot of the glacier and you could have a little glacier experience. So it became very popular with tourists, and it's really well known throughout the world. In fact, it even appears in a James Bond movie. Can I just say... You get me? It's very easy to confuse me. We often get confused, me and Sean. But it even occurs in the James Bond movie, Dr. No, I think. Dr. No comes up the mountain. This is the hotel which they built for all the tourists by the glacier. And in the past, the glacier was right by the side of the road. This is a gift shop. So it was very famous for lots of reasons. And so the family who owned the land, they built a gift shop right by the side of the glacier. And every winter, the glacier is always moving down the mountain. It's replaced at the top by snow and it moves down the mountain. In the spring, the family who owned it, they dig a grotto into the ice. They tunnel through the ice and they make little caves and seating areas, and you can pay a few euros, Swiss francs, and you can walk under the ice and the blue light comes through, and it's a little kind of touristic kind of treatment. So it was a little business. They were making a little living out of it and making a little touristic thing. Every year they have to dig another one because the glacier moves, but it's easy to dig the tunnel. It just takes a few days. So the company are trying to keep their business alive. Only because they're trying to keep the business alive is any of this worth doing. They're only trying to keep the business alive. This is a little tourist gift shop that they've got. And what they've done is they've invested very heavily in geotextiles. So this is this stuff which they put under sewage farms and children's playgrounds and airfields and stuff like that. So they were spending 90,000 Swiss francs just refreshing it every year to helicopter more material up onto the thing just to keep their gift shop in business. So I was interested very much in this thing. It looked to me like the landscape reminded me of my First World War landscapes. The old photographs. Frank Hurley, famous Australian photographer who photographed in the British sector during the war, these amazing, twisted, torn, broken landscapes of northern France and the Somme in particular. So when I first saw it, it reminded me very much of this. But I guess it also reminded me of this painting which I'd used before as a title for a project, Paul Nash, one of the not very famous British photographers, British painters from the 1900s, a war artist, commissioned to paint the landscapes, the English commissioned artists to paint the landscapes in oil. He produced this amazing thing, We Are Making a New World. It's a great title. But in particular, I thought about this painting of Paul Nash's, because in the First World War, everything was at night. It was the world's first nocturnal war. Everything happened at night. In the daytime, no one did anything. In the nighttime, you fixed the barbed wire. In the nighttime, you dug trenches. In the nighttime, you went on patrol. In the nighttime, you went and got the dead bodies from no man's land and brought them back to your cemeteries. Everything happens at night. So it was a kind of terror of the First World War soldiers, was that these things would, all you could do, hit the floor, try and look like a rock. Otherwise, you are dead because you're in the middle of nowhere. So it became the sort of the thing that the soldiers most feared. And the greatest artist that went through the entire First World War wasn't Paul Nash. It's George Gross, Otto Dix by a long shot. And Otto Dix reproduced, it's not in the picture, but you can see the light in this picture is the light from one of those flares. It's from high above. It's not the sunlight, this. It's a cone of light, and it's from high above. So I knew that when I photographed the blanket on the glacier, I wanted to see if I could find this light somehow. How could I get above? I haven't got a helicopter. Tricky. How do you get above a glacier with a light? And sometimes the lights would be different colour and they would swing in the skies and create these nightmarish kind of LSD kind of visions which Dix went back to again and again throughout his career. And I guess, in some ways, I think this is the best picture of the First World War for me. The best art painting of it. Sketch of the First World War. Because it has none of the cliches that you expect in a war. It doesn't have broken buildings and barbed wire and dead soldiers or any of those things. It's just this landscape and this bizarre light. It was like a kind of recurring nightmare for the soldiers. So I want to think about how could you get above this light? Because I have to say, the light that I wanted, the first time I saw the glacier, it looked like the glacier was being prepared for its own funeral. It looked like it was being made ready for the grave. The only thing I could describe it, being rolled in this lengths and lengths of this white cloth, huge expense. And I wanted a light which looks like the light you get on a mortuary table. Right? From the beginning, that was the idea. I need the light that looks like the light over an autopsy. How do you do that on a glacier? It's tricky. But I'm good at tricky. So I bought a balloon. Why not? Eh? I bought a helium balloon from some dodgy military supplies place in England. Supplies special forces with antennas. And I got a deal on this. So it's a helium balloon. Helium is not hydrogen, so it can't blow up. It can lift 1 kilo. It doesn't take the camera, it takes the light. Camera stays on the ground, light goes in the air. It's always on a string, and it's actually not even a balloon, it's actually a kite. What's the word in Slovenian for kite?
Kite.
Kite, there you go. Turns out I know Slovenian. It's actually a kite with lift. So unlike a drone, which is very difficult to fly on a glacier because you get very strange, crazy winds on a drone, and the drone's always fighting against wind. And if the drone has to fight, battery power is dying. Your flight times are really reduced if it's having to fight wind. This thing, when the wind gets on it, it has so much lift because it's basically a kite, and it plays like, once the string gets tight and it's downwind, it's very, very stable, very stationary. And if I want to move it to the right, it's to the right. If I want to go back, I can just move it around to place. So in every one of those pictures over there, somewhere in the picture, Klaus is hiding behind something, and he's holding the string. And I'm just trying to get it into the place, and the wind is moving it slightly, and I love the balloon. The drone is a horrible one. Everyone hates drones. Everyone hates drones. But the balloon, everybody loves the balloon. Mister, can I play with your balloon? Can I hold the string? Mister, can I have a go? Everybody loves the balloon. It's the total opposite of the drone. Drones are an annoying piece of shit. The balloon, I fell in love with the balloon. Nobody falls in love with the drone. You're more likely to fall in love with your refrigerator than you are with a drone. So this is a fantastic piece of kit. It gave me this chance to put this light above. I wanted this light like a mortuary slab, like an autopsy. But also, I think of the balloon as the light on the balloon is like, it's like having your own moon. As a photographer, that's fantastic, right? Having your own moon that you can put exactly where you want, and this beautiful downward light. I'd used it before in the First World War, lighting some of these cemeteries, just a super cone of light, quite narrow, dropping down in the centre of these pictures. And I thought the effect was very beautiful. I liked it very much. I never published any of these pictures, but I really liked the effect. As a piece of, as a technology test, pretty good picture. And I thought this was a really nice picture. As a sort of proof of concept, I thought that was an excellent picture. So I like working with the balloon. People like it. It's very approachable, but it gave me this light like an autopsy slab, which is what I wanted. And then the final idea that I wanted to talk to you about is that it interests me a great deal on the glacier that what you have there is water that is as hard as a diamond cutting saw. If water is at this amount of time, these kind of pressures, water, something, the softest thing you could ever imagine, the thing you wash your face with, the thing you wash your baby's bottom with, water can be turned into something so hard and strong, it can slice through a mountain. I think that's amazingly interesting, this state change. And that state change, I think, is something you can see in art. I'm very interested in the Paleolithic. You're not meant to kind of play with these gods. You fear them and worship them and do as you're damn told. And that's why they're portrayed in this rigid form. And it stays the same for 40,000 years, pretty much, of our history, until about 300 BC. The form is completely solid and rigid. There's no softness, there's no delicacy, there's no pulse, there's no life. It's utterly rigid. And then, amazingly, and the bizarre thing is, we don't know why. We don't even know who. We don't even know their names. But you get this thing called the Greek Baroque. And suddenly, somebody on the islands of Greece, in the Aegean Sea, starts doing that. And we don't know why. We don't even know their names. Everything that they've seen before them is that solid, rigid thing. And suddenly someone takes marble, Carrara marble, one of the hardest stones that there are, and suddenly starts to turn it into something that twists and has pain and anguish. And you can see the suffering in this man's face and the strangling of the snake around his son's throat as he wriggles and tries to free himself. And you can see life pulsing beneath the skin and the muscles beating, the heart, the blood pulsing through his veins. All of this is in stone for the first time in 40,000 years of our history. And we don't even know why it took place. It's the most amazing mystery in art as far as I'm concerned. And the really extraordinary thing is that for another 1,000 years, no, another 1,200 years, painting doesn't even bother to catch up. Painting continues to be like this, utterly rigid. Even when it's portraying the pain of Christ, there's no sympathy there at all. You can't connect with that. It's utterly flat and rigid. And for some reason, sculpture is doing these amazing things, and painting doesn't bother it. Not interested, not interested. 1,000, 1,200, 1,300 years, they just smash on doing this thing again and again. And then suddenly you get this. And somebody suddenly realizes that you can make paint also look like softness and pulse, and paint can make you cry because you can see the last breath. But it's something much more liquid and soft and fluid and flowing, with life pulsing through it, with veins and a heartbeat and breathing and lifting and rising its chest in painting and in sculpture. For the first time they're both doing it, but it took 1,200 years for painting to catch up. I'll just show you the little the pictures that I made, and there's a little bit of cello music that goes with it. Hopefully just one piece of music. Just a little 3 minutes. Good. And I'll just show you one last thing, which is I had an exhibition in Saudi Arabia last week, 3-4 weeks ago, and they did that, which I didn't even know they were going to do, which is the biggest thing I've ever seen. It's bigger than the house. And I was very nervous about having an exhibition in Saudi Arabia because maybe we shouldn't be, they did cut a journalist to pieces in their Turkish embassy, of course. And I expected when I put it on Instagram that I would get a lot of flack on Instagram. But I've got to say, getting a picture of a melting glacier that big on a wall of a building in Saudi Arabia is exactly the bloody place where it should be. So I'm not taking any criticism about dealing with Saudi Arabia. That's exactly where that picture needs to be. Thank you very much for coming. I'm sorry about the screw up with the sound and stuff, and I'm sorry that 27 years ago I went to Rwanda and it still upsets me. It's fucking amazing. Anyway, if you have a chance, I'm very happy to answer questions, and you can go down to the bottom and see the prints of the shroud work. Thank you very much for coming, everybody. Thanks.